Okay, sounds great. Thanks so much, Anton. All right, I'm going to flip to sharing my screen here. All right, and then flip to showing the presentation. All right, Anton, let me know if you can see my presentation here.
Yes, I can, no problem.
Okay, here we go. All right, so I'm excited to talk to you today about LinkedIn advertising. It's the B2B advertising platform that you've never heard of. And my reason behind giving this title is, I've had about the last 8.5 years in the online marketing industry. I've done lots of SEO, lots of PPC. I got recruited into a local technology company here in Utah, and that was, they're very heavy into B2B. That's business to business advertising. And that was really my first exposure to it. But I figured that I had known, most of the channels. I'd had lots of experience in online marketing. Well, I went in to go talk to the CMO, and I told her my plan for, this is what I'm going to do for search engine optimization. This is what I'm doing for pay-per-click advertising. And she said, okay, all that sounds great, but just so you know, we have a little pilot test going on of LinkedIn advertising. See what you can do with it. And to her, I said, oh, yes, ma'am. And I turned around and started laughing to myself because I've been doing this stuff for, 4-ish years at this point. I felt like I knew everything, and I had never even heard of LinkedIn advertising. I didn't even know they had a platform. And so really, to keep the egg off my face and to just, hold my pride and my ego, I jumped into the platform and started trying to figure it out, trying to understand, what is it used for? How do I find success? Is there anything here that I should care about? And what happened is, after about 2 weeks of just jumping into the platform and starting, one of the sales guys came over to me and said, hey, AJ, I don't know what you're doing, but keep it up. It's working. We love your leads. And it turns out that all of the leads that they were talking about were all sourced from LinkedIn. And so I would hear this feedback from the sales team over and over and over. And so after about 3 years of hearing this, I decided there was probably a market opportunity for me to scratch that entrepreneurial itch. And so I left my full-time job to start B2Linked.com. Which is an agency where we specialize just in LinkedIn advertising. So a very niche agency. I live in Utah in the United States with my wife, and we just had our 4th baby here a few weeks ago. So she's very small. She doesn't do very much except for cry and eat and poop and sleep, but she's super adorable. I don't really look like it, but I'm a triathlete. I love endurance sports. I'm also a lover of all exotic cars. I love Aston Martins. I love Ferraris. And I am a redheaded ginger, which means that I don't have a soul. And the license plate that you can see over there to the right is actually my license plate. I have a LinkedIn license plate. So I am that guy. Okay, so let's jump right into the challenges that B2B marketers face. There are 2 different elements that make B2B marketing really difficult. Number one, you have these offline conversion events. That means that someone comes and fills out a form on your website. That's not the end. It's not like e-commerce where you can then say, great, we have a customer. Let's tally this up and figure out how much revenue and how much of a return we've made. Instead, with B2B, someone fills out a form, then a salesperson will usually contact that person, and then it starts this relationship that occurs offline that you can't track with tracking pixels. And so B2B marketers are faced with this idea of, okay, so first of all, how do we find these conversion events and how do we start to report on them? The next big issue that we face are these delayed sales cycles where we may bring in a lead today, but that person may not become a customer for 6 months or 10 months or a year, or sometimes even longer in enterprise life cycles. And so what this does is it forces B2B marketers to be more sophisticated. We have to use complex modeling of data to understand how the delayed sales cycle and how to bring in offline conversion events in order to make up the whole picture so we can find and track our own ROI. And so this gives rise to a type of marketing which is called pipeline marketing. And you can see this hashtag. You are encouraged to tweet on this hashtag. There's a community building around the idea of pipeline marketing, and I'll cover that here on the next slide. But one thing I want to talk about is, I think as a newer B2B advertiser, I started feeling a little bit left out because we have these brands that we talk about over the dinner table, the Nikes, the Under Armours, all these really what I would call a sexy brand. And B2B companies are not sexy brands. They're not household names. But here's an interesting stat for you. 72% of the Fortune 1000 are categorized as B2B. So although if you're a B2B marketer, you may feel a little bit left out because you're not working for a really sexy brand, keep in mind that, with 72% of the Fortune 1000, it may not be sexy, but it's definitely where the money's at. So you're doing great. All right, so here's pipeline marketing, and the entire idea around pipeline marketing is that all leads are not created equal. It means that if someone comes and fills out a form on your website, and let's say they fill out the form that's contact us now for a demo, and someone else comes and fills out a form that is give us your information and we will give you this free white paper. Those two leads are very, very unequal. The one where someone is contacting you for a demo, they are likely much further down in the buying process. They're closer to purchase. Their intent is known. Whereas, if you're downloading a piece of content, your intent isn't really known. And so pipeline marketing is about making optimization decisions based on real results. And so what you can see here is this funnel metric. This I lifted from HubSpot. This is their sales funnel visualization here. They take you from visits to leads to marketing qualified leads all the way down to customers. And so pipeline marketing is all about saying, okay, we have generated 100 marketing qualified leads. What does that tell us about our opportunities? Or what does that tell us about maybe sales closes or amount of revenue gained? And what happens is, if you have 100 marketing qualified leads, maybe only 5 of those convert into customers. And so if you only have 5 data points at the customer level, you may not be able to actually determine which advertising channels are bringing you the best revenue the most efficiently, because 5 data points is quite frankly too small. But you might come up here to opportunities where maybe you have 20, and maybe that 20 is more descriptive of the data channels that you're driving. Or maybe you're trying to make decisions at the marketing qualified lead level where you have 100. And so pipeline marketing is all about making decisions based on the data that you have and where they are in the sales funnel. When I talk to most online marketers, the majority of them, when you say, hey, you're in B2B, how do you advertise? The vast majority are hands down going to say Google AdWords, because that's really what digital marketing was predicated on, is this concept of paid search. And what's so great about paid search is this, when they type a keyword and they are then shown an ad, there's this high degree of intent. That person would not have been searching if it weren't for having a project that they're over, or a curiosity or a need. The problem is, if you send a whole lot of paid search traffic to landing pages and to sales teams, your sales team is probably going to come to you and say, hey, this is great. All these leads are they're ready to go. They're very hot leads. But do we have a way to maybe qualify these people a little bit better? Because we're getting a lot of people who either can't afford our product or are not the buyer. They don't have the authority to make a purchase. And so I have this line here: CEOs can type the same keywords as janitors. And which is really true. When you're running paid search, you'll get all kinds of different people. So my question to you is, how do you ensure that your ad dollars are going to be spent on someone who has the budget, the authority, the need, and the timing? So when you're in B2B, you have some options. You can do things like advertising in industry publications, which is very expensive and not scalable at all. and I wouldn't recommend it, especially starting out. You also have these really cool ad technology vendors, people like Bizzo. Bizzo was acquired by LinkedIn here a couple of years ago. Quantcast, Demandbase. Again, amazing technologies, but very, very expensive, very much out of the reach of smaller companies and smaller advertisers. And so what the whole industry has been focusing on then is this idea of paid social, where, you know, this chart I showed you before, or my acronym that I use here, BAMT, budget, authority, need, and timing. When you're driving traffic from AdWords, that traffic is rating really high on a need and a timing because they're typing that keyword. They're actively searching for something. They're not communicating their budget or authority. But the cool part about paid social, if you're using Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, you're choosing your prospects by who they are and what qualities they possess rather than what they're looking for right now. So it's the other side to that coin. And so when you look at Twitter, the cost per click is quite low. So it probably looks really attractive. The problem for B2B is Twitter really only has a couple really good ways to reach people for B2B. That's around hashtags at events, and that's followers of industry evangelists. So if your product, if your service doesn't fit in well with that, then Twitter is really hard to utilize the targeting. Facebook has some pretty decent B2B targeting. I mean, you can target by job title, by industry, those types of things, but and the cost per click is usually quite low. The problem with it is, on Facebook, someone is, you know, you don't know what they're thinking about. They probably are thinking about their personal life. They're probably thinking about their kids. They're probably thinking about their friends. And so when you show them an ad for something that they might want for work, they go, oh, okay, that's interesting, but you know, maybe I'll look at it when I get to work. Whereas with LinkedIn, you get this very precise targeting. It's by far the best B2B targeting out there. And when someone is on LinkedIn, you know they are either thinking about work or their career. And so it makes some very, very powerful conversions. So let's talk about the pros behind LinkedIn advertising. Number one, we as users, we curate our own data. We keep it up to date, which means that advertisers targeting us are very rarely wasting impressions on the wrong audience if they're being careful. And I would attribute this to the fact that we as professionals, we create our LinkedIn profiles to be an extension of us professionally. And if we have a LinkedIn profile that doesn't reflect what we're currently doing, it just shows this lack of I guess, effort. I'll cover this on a further slide, but the robust targeting of LinkedIn is hands down the best for B2B. I mentioned how users have a business mentality when they're on LinkedIn. Another great thing is when you are targeting, let's say, CEOs or a very high-level executive on LinkedIn, and someone comes and fills out a form and becomes a lead, you're not going through that CEO's gatekeeper. You are reaching that CEO directly, which is very powerful. You don't see that a whole lot with other types of ads. And keep in mind that LinkedIn advertising tends to produce larger deal sizes than any other platform. And so even if you have a platform that's bringing in a lower cost per lead, what happens is LinkedIn usually ends up looking pretty good when you take into account that you're going to close a larger deal through LinkedIn. All right, so it's not all sunshine and rainbows for LinkedIn because there are definitely some cons here. Number one, the LinkedIn ads platform is lacking a lot of functionality. So things that we've come to expect from a modern advertising platform, like conversion tracking, like day parting, the ability to bid based on what device someone is using, even having retargeting. These types of things are things that we expect from an ads platform. LinkedIn does not have this. These are all things that you either have to do yourself or go without. Another thing is when you're on AdWords or when you're in Facebook ads, you have this concept of, on AdWords, it's called your quality score. On Facebook, it's relevance score. LinkedIn, it's called relevancy score. And on these other platforms, you get to see what your relevancy score is, which is very heavily based off of your click-through rate. On LinkedIn, you don't actually get to see it. If you have a bad relevancy score, your ads are either going to stop showing or they will just cost a lot. Like you'll see really high cost per click, and you won't know anything about it unless you see that your ads have turned off and you launch something new. Another point against LinkedIn is that in the past, LinkedIn ads has been the ignored arm of LinkedIn, I would say. When you look at Facebook, when you look at AdWords, advertising makes up the vast majority of all of these companies' revenue, whereas LinkedIn has always gotten the majority of its revenue from recruiting and from LinkedIn Recruiter and Sales Navigator, and they have all these other focuses. And so their ads platform has really taken a back seat. I'm really excited to report that I'm seeing a lot of movement here, that this is changing. LinkedIn is starting to understand the value that their advertising brings to advertisers. So one question I get a lot is, who's a really good fit for LinkedIn? What types of companies work really well? Well, I will tell you, usually if you have a deal size over about $20,000 or whatever your currency is, you can usually make LinkedIn's revenue work quite well. And so a lot of times you'll take into account lifetime value, you'll take into account annual resubscribe rates in order to find out what deal size you're gonna have. Also, people who have a very specific target customer. If you can reach your customer on a billboard, you're probably going to get it for a lot less expensive. But if you are only trying to reach, let's say, HR directors in a very specific type of company, in a very specific type of industry, that type of person cannot be reached any other way. LinkedIn is going to be a great way to reach that person, especially because LinkedIn knows so much about that person. The different verticals, the company types that work really well on LinkedIn. Number one, SaaS software. So this is software as a service. It's a subscription type of software buy. Those tend to work really well, especially because they usually have larger deal sizes. Recruiting tends to work really well. People spend a lot of time on LinkedIn when they're looking for jobs anyway, and recruiters spend a lot of time on LinkedIn hunting these people down. The platform was essentially made for this function, but most don't think of using the ads platform to reach people. They think of this manual outreach or posting a job. Recruiting and showing ads for jobs tends to work really well, especially if you have one position you're trying to fill and you don't have headcount to go and hunt that person down. Just throw up an ad. And also, higher education, maybe schools, universities who are trying to recruit for a higher education, maybe like an MBA program or a master's program of some sort, they tend to work quite well on LinkedIn. And I would attribute this to the fact that LinkedIn's targeting is so good around education as well. All right, the flip side of the coin to this one, who is not a fit for LinkedIn? Well, I'll tell you, if you have a small deal size, if your deal size is worth less than about $10,000 or 10,000 of whatever your currency is, it's probably not going to work very well. I mean, your cost per click on LinkedIn is quite a bit higher than other platforms. And so you do need a larger deal size to support that. If you have a broad target, if you're looking for maybe showing ads to just managers, for instance, you can do that more cheaply on other platforms or through other means. Okay, if you're business to consumer, the targeting doesn't really lend itself very well to B2C. It's definitely more of a B2B targeting. With very few exceptions, but I have had some exceptions, B2C just does not work super well on LinkedIn. E-commerce doesn't work very well. What I've found is most users of LinkedIn are not surfing with their credit card out. So if you're running an e-commerce offer and you're hoping to show someone an ad and have them immediately buy something, it's usually really difficult. And that leads into our last point here. If you're doing a hard sell, if your offer is, hey, buy this or get on the phone with our sales team, it's going to be really hard to drive those leads because LinkedIn members, they're not looking to buy. What they're looking for is content and information. And so if you put yourself forward as a thought leader and as a solution provider, they will sell themselves. There are two different types of ad units on LinkedIn. The first has been around since 2008. And we call these text ads, but they're these right rail ads that you'll see over in the right rail of the desktop version of LinkedIn. And here's a screenshot of what you might see. Sometimes you'll see it as a full display ad, but other times you'll see it as this 3-pack of different text ads. They are very similar to AdWords. I'm pretty sure they were designed after AdWords, but they give you a little 50 by 50 image and 5 extra characters, 5 more than you get with AdWords. There are some very good things about this ad unit. First of all, you get the same targeting that you always get on LinkedIn, which is amazing. All of the traffic that you get from these is on desktop. So if your mobile experience is difficult or not optimized, these are probably going to be the best ad unit for you. The downside to these ads are that, like I said, they've been around since 2008 and very rarely changed. I think they've only updated the styling of them once. And they do look very much like ads. And so the way that people interact with them is they tend to not. They become banner blind to them. A lot of people don't even recognize that they're there. And so because of that, they end up with a really low click-through rate. You can see this 0.04% click-through rate would be really good. And keep in mind that that means that 4 people clicking out of every 10,000 people who view is a good rate. That's a very low rate of engagement, if you ask me. And they're also quite limited. So that leads us into their newest ad unit, which is the sponsored update. And this appears in your news feed. And because of that, this is a place where people come for information. The ad unit is very much geared towards content. And so because of this, you're going to end up with a lot more engagement. Take a look at this click-through rate here, a 0.4% click-through rate. That means 4 people clicking out of every 1,000 is good. And it's slightly better than average. But with this ad unit, you're able to drive a lot more traffic. And look how many more characters you have. Actually, the character limits have now updated. I'm going to change this here in the slides, but you get 128 characters for an intro, 38 characters for a title, and 155 characters for a description. This image that you see does not look very big. It's 180 pixels wide, but when you actually create the ad, you're uploading a 1200 pixel wide image, a 1200 by 800, and on a mobile device, it takes up the entire screen. So with this ad unit, you get a lot more real estate. And the dirty secret here is that because this runs on a separate auction than text ads, and there's more inventory, you're going to end up paying about the same. So would you rather pay to have a tiny little box on the side that no one ever sees, or would you rather have a click from a big, beautiful, lots of real estate ad unit? One thing to keep in mind with this ad unit, though, is that the majority of traffic that comes from them are from mobile, because this does come from your news feed, and the news feed is so often accessed from mobile and tablet from the apps. And so if your mobile experience isn't great, this is going to be a pretty hard ad unit for you to use. You might find that 65% of your traffic comes from mobile in some areas. All right, so I've talked and alluded to the fact that LinkedIn has great targeting. Let's talk a little bit about some of the targeting options available. So when you're targeting a professional, you can target them by their job title, what their job function is, or the department that they sit in, their level of seniority. If they're a manager, if they're a C-level, if they're a VP, director, you get access to all that. You can excuse me, you can target them by their skills, what skills they have listed on their profile. And these are, of course, vetted by each other. We tend to endorse each other for various skills. And then what groups they're members of. When someone joins a group, that's a big indication of what their interest is. So if I join a group that's about LinkedIn advertising, that means that I'm interested in a very specific niche of PPC. You can also target members of certain types of companies. So you can say, I only want to show ads to someone who's in the high tech or the consumer goods industry. You can say, I only want to target mid-sized companies, maybe with 51 to 2,000 employees, or maybe I only want to target enterprise and do 5,000 plus employees. I can do that. You can even target specific companies by name. The education targeting is quite good, which is, I think, why education as a niche works so well on LinkedIn. You can target people by what school they went to, by what degree they have, what they studied in school. Very powerful if you're advertising to someone based on an educational preference. The normal demographic stuff that you'd expect, gender, age, the geography that they're in. But my favorite part about all of this is the fact that you can run combinations of almost all of these, or even run exclusions. My favorite use of exclusion is to set an advertisement for one of my clients and then to exclude all of their competitors, which means even if they have a competitor who sits in their target area, their target market, that other company, this competitor, won't know that they're advertising on LinkedIn and probably will never realize unless they see it on an ad on someone else's computer. Very cool. All right, so if you want to jump in and actually play with LinkedIn ads, go to linkedin.com/ads, and ads has to be lowercase, I found out. Expect an average cost per click. If you're advertising in the United States or in the UK, expect an average cost per click between about $4 and $8. If you're advertising in, let's say, the Philippines or India, you can expect somewhere around the $2 mark or sometimes even less, depending on how you're bidding. So it's totally dependent on who your audience is and how desirable they are to other advertisers. But keep that in mind as you go in. Don't set up an account if you can't make the economics work of a $4 click. When I first started playing with LinkedIn, I found some immediate successes, and I wanted to know how to scale. The problem is that it's not immediately clear in the platform how do you scale. I mean, you can raise your budget, but what happens if when you raise your budget, it doesn't spend any more money? You're demand limited. Well, let's talk about 4 different ways that you can go about targeting the same professional in a lot of cases. And I'll show you a quick example. So number 1, I think what most B2B professionals are used to is this idea of, well, let's target by job title. And that makes a lot of sense. But keep in mind that there are 2 things kind of against job title. First of all, everyone else is already using it, which means that type of targeting is probably going to be pretty competitive, and you're going to end up paying a little bit more per click. So let's look at some of the others too. This idea of doing a job function combined with a level of seniority. You can also do skills with seniority or groups with seniority. And here's an example for you. So let's say that my target market is CMOs. And so this Venn diagram here represents every CMO who is available on LinkedIn. If I'm targeting just by job title, what happens is the strike I told you about it of titles being competitive, I didn't tell you that the job title field on LinkedIn is a free form field, meaning that at some point, LinkedIn has to look at what everyone wrote and try to put them into buckets and try to understand what their job title means and who it's similar to. And a lot of times they can't. We tend to put funny things into the job title field as professionals. Sometimes we'll put a description of what we're good at. Sometimes we'll make up funny or silly titles. Or sometimes, sometimes our title is not something that a lot of other people have. And so because of that, we're not reaching our entire addressable market here. You can see all these CMOs who are not being reached if we are a little bit lazy and only create one campaign here. So let's do a job function campaign as well. And of course, there is going to be this bit of overlap here, but what I'm talking about is a separate campaign that is targeting, let's say, job function of marketing and a seniority of CXO. A C-level targeting. And of course, the intersection of that is a CMO. And what you found is we're able to reach a little bit more. And then the same thing with skills. Maybe you can choose a skill that only a marketer would have. Maybe something like AdWords audits or marketing automation analysis, or something like that only a marketer would have. And then you layer that CXO seniority on top, and you're left again with a CMO. more overlap, but also more access to area that other marketers aren't going to be able to find. And then the same thing with groups. Maybe you can target marketing groups and layer on a seniority of CXO, or maybe you can just target CMO groups. There are groups out there that only CMOs are allowed to join. And then because of this, you found a way to scale in a very scalable way to reach all of these CMOs in ways that your competition is probably not thinking to do. All right, so who uses LinkedIn ads? Here's an interesting graph. And this is the reason why I called the presentation the killer B2B ads platform that you've never heard of, is because when you look at it by the numbers, no one has heard of LinkedIn. I mean, of course, everyone knows Google AdWords, but Facebook ads, $3.8 billion in revenue in Q4 of 2014. But Facebook hasn't been around nearly as long as LinkedIn's ads platform. And look at this, 153 million in Q4 last year. It's relatively unused, which is great news for someone like me who makes a living off of using it. It means less competition, but it also means plenty of growth opportunities. All right, so one question I get from almost everyone is, okay, so I want to start advertising on LinkedIn. What do I put on there? What am I advertising? What's my offer? Well, here's a content marketing funnel, a way to visualize what type of content you're showing to people. If you are putting up something like a blog post or an infographic, I put this at the top because it's very, very low friction. Low friction meaning that there's not very much required of the user. They don't have to give you their personal information. They don't have to spend a whole lot of time reading it or engaging in it. They don't have to worry about a salesperson following up with them. It's very, very low friction. Whereas something down here like a webinar, and this is ironic because we're speaking on a webinar right now, but my guess is the vast majority of you would not have joined this webinar if this was your first experience with webpromo.expert. A webinar requires you to take 60 minutes of your day in the middle of a busy day, and you have to listen to some schmuck talk for 60 minutes. And you're not going to do that unless you know that this person understands what it is they're talking about and the value that they're going to provide to you. And so that's a very high friction. You're also giving up your personal information, so you can a lot of times expect that a salesperson is going to follow up with you. So I show this to you from perspective of when you're choosing what type of offer on LinkedIn. As soon as you get, and this is any ad platform, if you get someone onto your site, if they're looking at a blog post or an infographic or something else that's just generally interesting, but there's not really an offer there, you're not asking for their information. As soon as you have them on your site, you can start retargeting them. You can nurture them through retargeting ads, which is excellent. But then, of course, by the stage where you're asking for an email address, like this guide or a white paper stage, at that point, you can begin nurturing them with email through marketing automation. And so what I say the sweet spot is for starting on LinkedIn is right here at this guide and white paper type of stage. It's very low friction. You're only asking usually for a name and an email address. So pretty low friction that way. A lot of people don't follow up on just a piece of content download. And so people aren't super afraid a salesperson is going to start hunting them down. But you also have their email, so you can begin nurturing them that way. So here's the sweet spot. But ebooks, webinars, even a trial demo, they can be successful on LinkedIn. But when you're planning your initial foray, I would say start at the guide or a white paper. Most people who do retargeting, they think about it from a perspective of paid search. And when you're running traffic from paid search, the only thing you really know about that person is what keyword they typed or what landing page they landed on. And it makes for these audiences that are built around a keyword, which is not very powerful. It's not a very complete view of who that person is. But when you're targeting with paid social, with LinkedIn especially, you're building a persona. You understand very carefully who that person is. So let me give you an example. Let's say that you're targeting only CIOs, and that means that anyone who clicks on your ads is a CIO. They wouldn't have seen the ad if they weren't. And so that means that you start building this retargeting audience of every single cookie in that pool is a CIO. And that's a very powerful thing when you're thinking of different offers to run through your retargeting or different ways of messaging to the people who are being retargeted. You understand that's a very high level audience, and you understand how you speak to them. Yeah, okay. My recommended retargeting mix here is a Google Tag Manager or any type of tag manager that you have access to, a container containing AdWords remarketing tag, Facebook custom audiences tag, and Twitter tailored audiences tag. And what this is going to do, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, but to me, your customer is not someone who just lives only on one platform. These are people who visit many different sites. And so in order to get in front of them in the strongest possible way, you want to be in front of them on display ads around the web. AdWords is going to be your least expensive, most effective way to do that. They're going to spend a lot of time on Facebook because everyone does. And so being in front of them on custom audiences is very important. They're going to be interacting a lot of times on Twitter. And so being there with a Twitter tailored audience is also extremely powerful. I want to share a case study of a company called ObservePoint, and they do tag management software, like an auditing type of software. And what was interesting is when I started working with them, they understood who their customers were, but they have job titles that are all the way across the board. And I'll show you here on the next slide a little example of what that looks like. But they were saying, we have some great customers, like a third of the Fortune 500 are their customers. And so what we did is said, okay, we want to figure out how to target more people like this. How do we do that? Well, let's take a list of the top 200 customers of theirs. And these are people who absolutely fit their profile. They did purchase from them. They're bigger deal sizes. And so we want to find more people like that. We took those emails and we uploaded them to a social scraper tool called Social123. And what they did is they took those email addresses and went through and appended LinkedIn skills and LinkedIn groups and the job titles from their LinkedIn profiles, returned them in a big spreadsheet. We threw that into Tableau and ran a frequency distribution across all of those, all of that audience to find the most commonly listed skills, groups, and job titles. And we built our own homegrown lookalike audience. So here's a screenshot of what that looked like. When we grabbed the job titles, these were the most often used job titles of their campaigns. And you can see these are very much across the board. I mean, you have everything from web analyst to data manager to data architect. I mean, very, very different, diverse types of titles. When we threw those into groups, we took the groups that these people tended to be members of. You can see Adobe Marketing Cloud. There's like there's Google Analytics in here, all those types of groups. These are people who tend to be very technical. And then to keep it safe, to make sure that we weren't targeting just the janitor, very low level interns, we added this seniority filter here. So we were saying we only want to show to people who are manager and above. And then we took this a step further and we said, hey, we found these skills that people tend to have. Let's look at web analytics, digital marketing, Google Analytics. And of course, again, to keep out the riffraff, we added this seniority filter. And that was a great way of us to essentially start with not understanding who the audience was to understanding exactly who they are by what's in their LinkedIn profile. Okay, that's really it. So I'd like to go ahead and open up for Q&A here. And Anton, if you want to take it away, feel free.
Yeah. Okay. Can you switch your camera and so we can see you?
You bet.
Okay. There is slight problem that there is a lag, as I told you, some kind of time lag. So we are talking and they will see us in a minute or so. So I'll check if we do have a questions. If we don't so far, I will ask you a question. Let me see page on the comments. Guys, please use comments to ask questions. questions, comments, anything, live comments. Just type your question just behind the screen, and I will ask AJ this question. Okay, so AJ, okay, it was very interesting and very well. Plenty of things I didn't know. I read some Australian article about webinars actually, so it was kind of close to my heart, or too close to what I'm doing at the moment. And some big, well, I have to admit, big Australian companies, they started webinars, and they said it was very effective for them to use LinkedIn ads to bring extra people. Everything you said points in a different direction. I mean, well, obviously, okay, you said in the United States, United Kingdom, $4 to $8. Here, it would be the threshold would be €2. Less than €2, forget it. Just forget it. Which is costly. Obviously, taking into account this webinar is free of charge. But obviously, in perspective, do you think anything like for us it would work, for example?
Yeah, good question. So I'll clarify the webinar comment by saying that a webinar is inherently higher friction of an offer. You do have to take time out in the middle of your day. You do usually have to give up your personal information in order to gain access. And so when you're talking about bringing in leads and having someone sign up for a webinar as a lead, that lead is going to cost more money. The flip side to that is, however, that when someone listens to you for 60 minutes, they understand you as a person, they understand you as a thought leader, you've shared great content, they trust you, they're going to have a higher propensity to close. So I'm definitely not bad-mouthing webinars. I think webinars are fantastic. I will say that if you're looking for your lowest possible cost per lead, a webinar is not going to be your cheapest offer, but a lot of times they end up being your highest close rate. So in your example here with Web Promo Expert, I would say that LinkedIn is probably not the best channel for you because, just like you said, it is very expensive. And not that it wouldn't be worth a test, but I would say in the majority of the tests that I've run, it hasn't made sense for something with a lifetime value less than about $10,000.
Yeah, right. Okay, we do have a questions from audience. Eugene asking about a little bit more information about Lead Accelerator.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so LinkedIn acquired a company called Bizzo back in 2013, and this was a really interesting acquisition. This was the first signal that LinkedIn was showing that they actually cared about their ads platform. What was interesting in the way that they rolled it out, Bizzo is a retargeting platform, a very sophisticated one, where they allow you to, much like you can do with other ad platforms, but they've made it very simple in the way that they say people who are top of funnel get this type of content. Once they graduate from there, they get this type of content once they graduate. And so you're walking them down the funnel. So Lead Accelerator is a very cool technology. The downside to the majority of advertisers is that it's quite expensive. You need to spend at least $25,000 a quarter to get access to it. It's a done-for-you solution, so it's very hands-off. You don't get a whole lot of control, which to me as a PPC advertiser, someone who comes from the world of AdWords, I have a difficult time with. Like I want to adjust bids. I want to shift between different metrics and optimization. Make my optimization decisions from on my own. And so anyway, that's Lead Accelerator. It's sold through LinkedIn's what they call LinkedIn Marketing Solutions. It's their premium branch. And so if you're spending over $25,000 on LinkedIn, then it's probably a good move for you.
Well, it's definitely not good move for me. We don't spend that much on LinkedIn. Okay, let me check if we do have. Okay. Okay, we do have another question. Irina asking, how successful are personal messages through LinkedIn Sales Navigator? Are you using these tools? What are the success figures? Any benchmarks?
Yeah, good question. So From sales teams that I've worked with in the past, I've been responsible for getting them Sales Navigator licenses. And Sales Navigator is really good because it allows you to reach out to, if it's 10 or 15 people that you're not connected to in a month, and send them an email. The downside to this is because it's become more and more pervasive, people are becoming a little bit more numb to those types of outreach messages. Whereas it might have been in the past that if you received one, you'd say, oh, I feel a little bit obligated to respond to this person because they went out of their way to message me. But now I'm seeing a lot of people who just kind of ignore it and say, oh, that looks like a sales pitch, I'm not going to respond. That being said, it's a very solid tool for sales teams because it allows you access that not a lot of other people have. And it's utilizing LinkedIn, which has all of our professional data. So I have used it a little bit. I have chosen to do the free option for my own profile. So I'm not a premium subscriber or anything like that. And I usually have a pretty easy time of communicating with people. But I'm also not a salesy person. And so I think if you approach someone with a sales type of proposition, it's going to be an immediate turnoff. But if you approach someone from a relationship standpoint, no matter what tool you use, whether it's Sales Navigator or just email or a connection request, is usually going to turn up better for you.
Okay, I have another question from Maria, and she is asking basically, is it true that the most effective way for group promotion is to promote business, but through the personal account?
That's a good question. So when you're in a group, you don't get to comment on behalf of a business. You're only commenting on behalf of a person. And so in group promotion, I think the name of the game is to not make it look like you're promoting. Like promote discussion, promote good content, and let those relationships get you leads and get you sales. And so I do think that the most efficient way in a group is to be involved and to do it from a personal level. Using LinkedIn's ads, you can show someone an ad because of a group that they belong to. So if you're, let's say Web Promo Experts has a LinkedIn group, I can show ads to you based off of being a member of that. But that doesn't mean that you're only going to see that ad within that group. So if you want to get people in the context of looking at that group, you have to be personally involved. It can't be on behalf of a company.
Yeah, it's basically very similar to Facebook, isn't it? People pay very little attention, or people even dislike a company's Facebook account, and people kind of like when it's a real, supposedly a real person.
Yeah, totally agreed.
Okay, let's see if we do have more questions. As I said, we do have a link. So Eugene, you remember the first question about accelerator said thanks. So he's quite satisfied. Well, I don't have questions. Okay, guys, let us get more questions if we do have some. Okay, so basically what I got out of everything is it's really business to business, and it's kind of, not big, but biggish from our point of view, kind of biggish business. So involved, it's not really, so for small and medium business, it's most of the time it's not the best tool.
Yeah, I do have several very small clients, very small businesses, but usually setting aside enough budget for LinkedIn to be, for it to make sense, for it to be efficient, you do have some testing and optimization to do. When you launch to say 2 audiences, one of them you're going to find out is terrible. That audience doesn't respond well, and you end up with a way too high of a cost per lead, whereas your other one might be great. And so, when you very first launch, you're probably going to see that, wow, my initial cost per lead is too high. Well, after you pause this one and leave just this one running, you're going to end up with much better. And so that's your first optimization decision. If you don't have a dedicated budget that you can put towards that, maybe let's say $1,500 to $4,000 to put towards a test, almost with no strings attached, knowing that that's not going to be the most efficient money you've ever spent, but it's a step towards optimization and building a channel, at that point you can be successful. So I realize these are still very big types of budgets for small companies. And so I totally agree. I think LinkedIn is one of those platforms that is very heavily catered to the Fortune 500, people who just have money to spend. And so I've made a lot of it work with smaller brands that probably the vast majority of people couldn't.
Yeah, okay. Let me see if we have more question and on our webpage, guys. Yeah, we do have. Okay, Irina asking, what is the minimum effective budget for B2B software company US market during the test? I think you more or less answered, but yeah, okay. This is particular question. So US market is B2B software company, and what's the minimum effective budget for testing?
Irina, that's a great question. So I'm going to answer this by saying what I tell people is it's based off of audience. So if you say, I'm a B2B software company, I'm advertising in the US, but if you only have one audience, let's say you're going after, maybe it's CIOs or IT folks that you're advertising to, or maybe it's marketers. One of those will be an audience, one of those campaigns. My recommendation is to set aside between $1,500 and $4,000 to run through that audience in order to understand its level of effectiveness. And probably what's going to happen is you'll generate a certain cost per lead. And then from that cost per lead, you'll say, okay, maybe our cost per lead was $130. If we continue this advertising, how many of those people are going to graduate to maybe a sales accepted lead? How many of those are going to graduate to become customers? And so in order to start understanding from a lead perspective, I'd say between $1,500 and $4,000 per audience. You can go less, but your data is not going to be super conclusive. And of course you can go more. More data is always better.
So it's 1,500, 1,500 to 4,000 American dollars. You would think would be the answer for Irina. Okay, Irina, I hope this is the answer for you. I type it as well. Okay, do we have any more questions, guys? Questions? Okay, I just remind you, anyone who wants to have a certificate of attendance, just write to me using this. You can just reply button on an email, which you have a link for, and put your name on it, and I will issue soft. It's a soft certificate. No trees gonna be cut. Okay, no tree gonna be cut. Let's see. Okay, Irina asking, what is the test period and how long to get visibility? What does she mean?
Irina, great questions again. So for a test period, I want to spend between $1,500 and $4,000 on an audience. The test period doesn't matter to me. If that's spent in 2 days or if that's spent over the course of 3 months, I just want to gather the data. So to answer that question, I would prefer that to be within a shorter amount of time, maybe a 1-month period, so that I can make decisions more quickly. But there's no issue if I'm patient waiting 2 months or 3 months to gather that data in order to then pause it, take a look back and say, all right, was that effective? How could it be more effective? And then to get visibility, so I'm not quite sure exactly what you're asking here, but I would imagine that because it's an ads platform, when you upload an ad, you're going to start gathering data from that group fairly immediately if people start clicking. The catch to LinkedIn is that they try so hard to keep their network to be of very high quality. And so it's not an automatic approval process for your ads like Facebook and Google, where it's algorithmic. Instead, every single ad is actually approved by a human. It's manually reviewed to make sure that there's no bad content in there. And so because of that, when you post up an ad, you're probably not going to start gathering data for sometimes several hours to maybe even a whole day.
Yeah, I have this experience, and I was wondering what is going on with my ads. Yeah, they kind of try to make it very high quality or show it as high quality, and sometimes it looks out of dated, but well, it's how it works. Okay, I don't know, Irina, if it was a well, if the answer is fine for you, if it's satisfied answer, well, we'll wait for Irina and see. Okay, we have another question from Maria. Okay, girls are running a show tonight. Could you please tell about case impressed AJ Wilcox greatly in terms of creative mechanics and result? So could you please tell about case? Okay, greatly in terms of creative mechanics. Any particular case?
Yeah.
I have to say I didn't get the question correctly, Maria. If I'm not putting it correctly, if it's you're asking for particular case which impressed AJ or what or something. Okay, give us a case, and maybe Maria will readjust her question.
Yeah, sure. So I've been impressed several times by different campaigns that I wasn't expecting on LinkedIn. You know, LinkedIn is a very, I'm actually surprised quite often. So LinkedIn is this very stodgy kind of professional network. And I've tried several times to do things that are more salacious, more like interesting ads, a little bit edgy. And what's really funny is every time I try to include phraseology that may be a little bit risque or trying to push the boundaries a little bit of what LinkedIn would allow, and I get it to work, I'm usually surprised by how the business community doesn't respond to it. Like, I think I'm being really creative as a marketer, and I'm trying to do something that's really attention grabbing, and I end up with really low click-through rates and low conversion rates, which I wouldn't expect. So my advice there on the network is you know, be very succinct. A professional does not have very much time to read into a very creative wording of your ad, trying to read into double meanings of words. They're not going to. If you write something as simple as, this is what the product is, this is what the offer is, that's going to end up usually performing much better than if you try to be very creative. On the other hand, I have seen some very interesting things work and not work. One thing you can understand is that when you're looking at LinkedIn as a website, all of the colors are these hues of whites and blues. And so if you're using white or blue in your imagery, you're essentially going to look like you're an element on the LinkedIn page, and it's not going to stand out very well. So, you know, I've obviously experienced some things that don't work very well, like don't fit along with this criteria. But usually if you're using something that's blue or yellow or red, that's going to help you stand out, and that's going to help you get a lot higher of a click-through rate from your desired audience. So yeah, a couple examples of just things that were not expected and worked really well. I found illustrations as an image to work really well. If you have a cartoon of some sort, those draw the eye. And on a very professional network, I wouldn't expect that to be the case. I've found stock photos, because they do look very professional. The vast majority of stock photos do not perform very well. And I think it's probably just because they fit right into everything else on LinkedIn, and they don't allow you to stand out.
Yeah, okay. So as all together, so don't make any jokes, don't be funny, just go straight to the point. And but cartoons, yeah, surprisingly, I would think, yeah, well, just nothing there. Okay, Maria, I hope it will. Maria said yes, so I interpret her question correctly, I guess. So yes, well, hopefully the answer was to your liking. Okay, guys, we about to finish. We've been in on air for about 1 hour. If you do have a question, last questions, shoot. If you don't, okay, AJ, if as a result of this webinar, but obviously the webinar is uploaded automatically. It's Hangouts are automatically uploaded on our YouTube channel, so people might watch it later and then and again and again and again. If somebody wants to ask you a question later on, are you open for business?
Oh, absolutely.
How can they reach you?
Okay, so I threw this slide up here on my screen that I'm sharing. This is my contact information. So if you want to email me directly, aj@b2links.com. I spend a lot of time on Twitter, @WilcoxAJ, and of course the website is b2links.com, and so you can always find me there.
Okay, it's very straight to the point, email, Twitter, and the web page. So if you have questions later on, professional questions, or at least intelligent questions, shoot. Okay, AJ, thank you. I'll just double check if I have more question. Okay, Maria said, thank you for webinar. Great. Is it possible to get presentation? Oh yeah, it's a great question. Will you pass me your presentation and we will upload it, or you can upload it yourself and give me a link?
Sure. Yeah, I'll post it right to SlideShare and give you a copy. I can send it to you as well so that you can email a hard copy out to everyone if they want.
Yeah, both way. So, okay, guys, a presentation will be available a few minutes after this webinar. As soon as I get a link or presentation itself from AJ, I will share a link with you on the same page you're watching now. Will be a link, or will be just whatever slides will be available, so you can download them and study them. And obviously, recordings of this webinar will be on our YouTube channel. Basically, it takes a few minutes to render it, sometimes half an hour, but after that it will be available. Okay, okay, more questions. No, thank you. We have some thank you for you, and I have thank you for audience as well. So for being with us, and any questions, any comments, write to me. If you don't like it, if you want to change something, if you want a particular person. AJ today was great. I love you, AJ. I hope we'll see you, I don't know, in a couple of months. Well, yeah, next year, maybe you'll get something new tricks how to do things, and maybe you find tricks how to do it cheaper, for example, for us. Okay, I'm just joking. Okay. Thank you very much for everybody.
Anton, thanks so much for having me, and thank you everyone for attending. We'll see you.
No, don't go.
I won't
go. One more thing. AJ can speak Russian. Can you, AJ?
Oda, говорю немножко.
Yeah, this is a great finish for tonight. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And if you can see it, it means we're already off the air.